All right, get ready, because we're taking a deep dive into a book that's been on my mind a lot lately. It's called Asian Other by Vidyan Ravinthiran. And you won't believe this, but the guy, he taught himself to read at 3 years old.
Whoa, 3 years old? Really? I'm still like struggling to remember what I had for breakfast this morning.
Right. It really makes you wonder what we were all doing with our childhoods. But no, this deep dive isn't about raising little geniuses or anything like that. It's about um, it's about identity and belonging and the way that words can be both weapons and lifelines, all kind of looked at through um, this really unique memoir where Ravinthiran mixes in poetry and social commentary. And we're going to be working with excerpts straight from the book itself. So, you'll really get Ravinthiran's voice coming through.
That's one of my favorite things about these deep dives. Like you really get a sense of the author's style. So where do we even begin with a mind like this? Like where do we start?
Well, right away, Ravinthiran starts talking about this idea of being hyper-minoritized. I mean, he's Sri Lankan Tamil, grew up in England, and then moved to the U.S. So he's got all these layers of identity that he's navigating,
Yeah.
right? And he's questioning those broad categories that people try to fit him into, like South Asian or Asian American.
Yeah, and he makes this really compelling point about how those labels, well, I mean, they can be helpful sometimes, but they can also kind of erase the individual nuances of a person's experience, you know? I mean, being Sri Lankan Tamil in England is a totally different experience than being South Asian in the US. And Ravinthiran, I think he's pushing back against this idea that anyone's experience can be fully, like, captured by a single label.
Yeah, it makes you think about how often we all rely on these kind of shorthand categories without really thinking about all the complexities that we're kind of flattening. And for someone like Ravinthiran, who's kind of straddling multiple cultures, that sense of not quite fitting in anywhere is even more pronounced. He even talks about how moving to the U.S. actually shifted his whole experience of being a minority. Because in England, he felt like part of a politicized underclass. But in the U.S., he suddenly gets lumped into this model minority stereotype, which, come on, that comes with its own set of baggage,
Oh, for sure. That's such a crucial point. He's showing how these labels are so often tied to very specific social and political contexts. The whole model minority myth, for example, that's deeply rooted in like American racial dynamics, you know, and it often serves to pit minority groups against each other.
Yeah, it's like he's constantly peeling back the layers of these labels, revealing the power dynamics and the historical baggage that they carry. And he really doesn't shy away from the challenges of, navigating those complexities. He even talks about feeling like he's constantly code switching, adapting his behavior and his language to try and fit in with different groups.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where his relationship with poetry becomes like so fascinating, because he describes it as this space where he can be his full complex self without having to, conform to any external expectations. It's almost as if poetry offers him this sense of belonging that he struggles to find in the real world.
Yeah, totally. He weaves in all these poems from different cultures and time periods. It's almost like he's building bridges between worlds that seem totally separate at first glance. And it's not just about, finding solace or escape in poetry. He uses it as a tool for understanding, a tool for dissecting the world around him.
Right. And there's this incredible passage in the book where somebody yells a racial slur at him from a passing car. And instead of just recounting the hurt and anger, he actually dives into a linguistic analysis of the words themselves. He breaks down their structure, their sounds, the way that they're intended to, dehumanize.
Yeah, yeah. It's like he's reclaiming his power by refusing to let those words control him.
Yeah.
Like he's using his intellect, his love of language to transform that hateful act into something else entirely.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's saying, you can try to hurt me with your words, but I'm going to use my knowledge to dismantle them, which, I mean, that to me is such a powerful act of resistance.
It makes you realize that knowledge, it can be a shield, a way of protecting yourself from the world's ugliness. And speaking of protection, he also dives into this idea of like intergenerational trauma, particularly through his family's experience during the Sri Lankan Civil War. He talks about his uncle who was imprisoned during the war and how that whole experience kind of rippled through the family, creating this undercurrent of like fear and anxiety.
It's like he's suggesting that trauma isn't just a personal experience, it's something that gets passed down, like an inheritance. shaping the lives of those who come after.
It really does make you wonder, like, how much of our own anxieties, our own fears are rooted in these unspoken histories that we inherit from our families. It's a heavy question, but it's something he explores with such sensitivity and insight.
He's so skillful at weaving together these personal anecdotes with these broader social and political issues. And he does it in a way that feels both like deeply personal, but also intellectually stimulating. I don't know how he pulls it off.
I know, right? And you know what else? You know what else just blew my mind was his observations of his son, Frank, who's autistic. He talks about how Frank's unique way of experiencing the world has challenged his own assumptions about neurodiversity. Like there's this scene where they're at a historic tavern and Frank just becomes completely fixated on the door. You know, most parents would probably try to redirect him or whatever. But Ravinthiran takes a step back and he actually tries to see the world through Frank's eyes.
And he starts to wonder, like, if maybe we could all learn something from Frank's, like, unfiltered curiosity, his way of engaging with the world, like, on his own terms. It's a really beautiful reminder that what we perceive as different can often hold these really profound insights.
It really does make you question all those societal pressures to like conform and fit in, to be normal. And maybe, just maybe, embracing those differences, celebrating them. That's actually the key to a richer or more meaningful life.
Yeah. And that, I think, that ties back to this overarching theme in the book of embracing complexity. Because Ravinthiran, he's constantly questioning easy answers, challenging assumptions, pushing back against this idea that we can ever fully know ourselves, or others for that matter.
Yeah, it's like he's saying that life is a constant process of becoming. Of shedding like old skins and embracing new perspectives. And it's in that that messy, unpredictable journey that we find our true selves, you know?
Exactly. He even questions this whole idea of like memoir. He argues that the traditional conventions can feel limiting, you know, like they're forcing you to fit your life into this neat narrative arc. And that's where his use of poetry, I think, becomes even more interesting because he uses it to disrupt that linearity, to introduce these new layers of meaning and interpretation. There's this one line that really stuck with me where he talks about the events of his life as a poem with facile displaced rhymes placed too far from their partner so that reading the poem of my life, you don't even hear it.
Whoa, okay. Let's unpack that for a second. What do you think he's getting at there?
I think he's acknowledging these hidden connections, these patterns that shape our lives, even when we don't consciously, like, recognize them. It's as if he's suggesting that our experiences, you know, they might seem random on the surface, but if we look closely enough, we'll start to see those recurring themes, the echoes, the rhymes that tie it all together.
It's like he's challenging us to dig deeper, to look beyond the surface of our own lives and discover the hidden poetry within.
And that's what makes this book, I think, so captivating. It's not just a memoir. It's an invitation to explore the complexities of identity, language, and the human experience itself.
So are you ready to dive even deeper? Because this is just the beginning.
Absolutely. I'm hooked. Let's see where this journey takes us. One thing that really struck me, like in this part, is how Ravinthiran connects his experiences with suspicion, you know, to his son, Frank's autism. He talks about how people sometimes make assumptions about Frank's intentions or capabilities, you know, based on his unique behaviors. It's like they're imposing their own expectations of what normal should look like. And anything that deviates from that, it's automatically met with suspicion.
It is. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Like they might mistake Frank's like lack of eye contact as disinterest or his repetitive movements for aggression or something. It makes you realize how easily we can misinterpret behaviors that fall outside of our very limited understanding of, especially when it comes to neurodiversity, where those differences are often, you know, invisible.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really powerful reminder, I think, to approach those interactions with more curiosity and empathy rather than just jumping to conclusions. And, you know, speaking of jumping to conclusions, that kind of brings us to this really fascinating section where Ravinthiran kind of delves into the story of the Green Knight.
Oh, yes. The Green Knight. I was wondering when we were going to get to that. It's just like a weird and wonderful story. So for those who haven't, you know, encountered this mythical figure, he's this otherworldly being who like bursts into King Arthur's court and challenges anyone to this bizarre game, a beheading game. And Ravinthiran, he digs into why this story like resonates with him, especially I think in the context of living in the U.S. After 9/11, when suspicion towards anyone who looked like him was at an all-time high.
Yeah, and he talks about being like stopped at a checkpoint and asked point blank, "Are you a terrorist?" Not once but twice, and it's chilling because he contrasts that directness with the more like subtle forms of suspicion that he encountered in England, where racism was often hidden beneath these layers of politeness and coded language. He talks about like having to decipher these microaggressions, these subtle shifts in body language and tone of voice. It's almost as if he had to become like a master code breaker just to like navigate everyday interactions.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
Just think about it. And it made me think about all the times, that I've probably missed those subtle cues.
Yeah.
Those moments where someone might have been harboring, prejudices that they weren't comfortable expressing directly.
I think we've all been there at some point. It's a constant learning process, recognizing those subtle forms of bias and figuring out how to respond in a way that feels both authentic and effective. And what's so interesting is how Ravinthiran connects those personal experiences to the Green Knight's challenge. Like he sees the Green Knight as this disruptive figure who forces people to confront their own preconceptions and fears.
He brings up Dev Patel's portrayal of Sir Gawain in the recent film adaptation, and how Patel's performance just adds this whole new layer of meaning to the story.
Yeah.
Like here you have this brown actor playing this iconic knight, and it's subverting centuries of like traditional casting where these roles were almost always reserved for white actors.
Exactly. And Ravinthiran picks up on that. He talks about how Patel's Gawain, he embodies this hesitant heroism, a character who's initially unsure of himself, but ultimately rises to the challenge, in his own unique way. And he even connects Patel's physical appearance, like his brown skin, to the Green Knight's like otherworldly green hue, suggesting that they both represent this disruption to the established order.
It's like he's saying that sometimes those who are seen as different or outsiders, they're the ones who are actually best equipped to challenge the status quo, to push us to see the world in new ways. And that ties back to this whole idea of errantry that he keeps coming back to, this embrace of the journey, of being willing to step outside your comfort zone, to face the unknown, even when it's terrifying.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's about recognizing that the path to growth, to self-discovery, it's rarely straightforward, and that it's often in those moments of uncertainty and discomfort that we actually learn the most. And speaking of discomfort, he's incredibly honest about his own struggles with anxiety. He talks about this habit of like picking at his thumb, this compulsive behavior that seems to like manifest when his anxiety is at its peak.
And he connects this very personal struggle to the broader anxieties of our time. The pressures we all face to succeed, to conform, to fit in. It's like he's saying that anxiety isn't just a personal failing. It's a symptom of living in a world that's constantly demanding more from us.
Yeah, and it's refreshing how he doesn't like shy away from those darker emotions. He talks about how observing Frank, who often navigates the world in ways that defy expectations. It's helped him, Ravinthiran, challenge his own understanding of what it means to be normal.
Yeah. He starts to wonder if maybe there's something valuable in Frank's perspective, if maybe we could all benefit from embracing a little more neurodiversity in our lives. It's like Frank's artism has given him this different lens through which to view the world, one that's not bound by those same societal pressures and constraints, and that's incredibly liberating.
Yeah, it's such a powerful challenge to those rigid notions of normalcy, and a reminder that true strength often lies in our differences. And that reminds me of another section where he talks about his own experiences growing up with a speech impediment, and how that shaped his relationship with language.
He describes this fascination with words, with their sound and structure, that seems to have stemmed from his early struggles with communication. Like he used to mispronounce words and invent his own like pronunciations, almost like he was creating his own private language.
Mm.
It's almost as if that early difficulty with language, it made him appreciate it even more, made him want to explore its nuances and possibilities.
And it's no coincidence that he finds solace and power in poetry, where language is, stretched and molded in all these creative ways. It's like he's saying that sometimes our greatest strengths, they come from those things that make us feel different, those things that set us apart.
And by embracing those differences, we can tap into a whole new realm of creativity and expression. And speaking of embracing differences, he talks about how his parents' experience as immigrants shaped his own understanding of identity and belonging. He talks about how they tried to assimilate, to adapt to this new culture, and the challenges they faced in navigating those cultural differences. It's clear that he admires their resilience and adaptability, even as he acknowledges the sacrifices that they had to make.
He reflects on how their experiences, their struggles, their triumphs, like how all of those have become woven into the fabric of his own story. It's a beautiful testament to the ways in which our families shape who we are, how their stories become intertwined with our own.
And it's interesting how he pushes back against this whole write what you know mantra that's so prevalent in the literary world.
Yeah.
He argues that sometimes the things that we think we know the best, the things that are closest to us, they're actually the most mysterious and elusive.
Yeah.
He talks about his repeated attempts to write about his childhood home, a place that should be familiar and comforting, but that continues to haunt him.
Yeah.
To elude his grasp.
Yeah. It's as if he's suggesting that those spaces of uncertainty, those things that resist easy categorization, they're actually the most fertile ground for creativity.
It's like he's saying that the best stories, they're often the ones that challenge our assumptions, that make us question what we think we know, and that the process of writing, of wrestling with those complexities, that can be a way of discovering new truths about ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah, it's not about finding the answers. It's about embracing the questions. And that takes us to another really, really powerful section where he talks about the importance of remembering, of honoring the stories of those who came before us.
He weaves in all these anecdotes about his parents, his grandparents, his extended family. It's like he's creating this tapestry of memories, of lives lived, and stories passed down. He's acknowledging the interconnectedness of generations, the ways in which our personal histories are always intertwined with these larger historical narratives.
And he doesn't shy away from the difficult histories, those moments of pain and trauma that have marked his family's past. He talks about the Sri Lankan Civil War, about the violence and displacement that tore apart communities and left these lasting scars. It's a heavy subject, but he handles it with such sensitivity and nuance.
And he reflects on how those events continue to resonate in the present, how the echoes of the past can shape our current realities. It's like he's saying that the past is never truly past.
Yeah.
That it lives on in the stories we tell, the memories we carry, and the ways we choose to engage with the world around us.
And he makes this really powerful statement about the Jaffna Library.
Oh yes, I was just getting to that. The Jaffna Library. It was this incredible repository of Tamil culture and history.
Yeah.
Its destruction during the Civil War was a devastating loss.
It was a deliberate act of cultural erasure,
Right.
and an attempt to silence and erase the Tamil narrative. And he doesn't just focus on the physical destruction of the building. He reflects on the loss of those irreplaceable manuscripts, those ancient texts that were lost forever, and the impact that has on the collective memory of the Tamil people. Yeah, it's a really powerful reflection on the fragility of knowledge, of history, and how we preserve and transmit our cultural heritage. And it brings up those kind of uncomfortable questions about who gets to control the narrative, like whose voices are amplified and whose are silenced.
And he talks about visiting the rebuilt library.
Yeah.
And even though it's physically restored, there's this lingering sense of emptiness, of loss. It's like the ghost of what was destroyed is still there.
Yeah. He even connects it to the Sri Lankan government's attempts to kind of downplay the atrocities committed against the Tamil people. It's like this broader pattern of erasing or minimizing the experiences of marginalized groups. It makes you wonder if it's ever truly possible to rebuild what's been destroyed, especially when it comes to something as intangible as cultural heritage.
It's a sobering thought, for sure. But even amidst all this heaviness, he finds these moments of grace and beauty in every day.
Mhm.
Like he talks about his parents and their little quirks, the way they've held on to these pieces of their past, the objects and rituals that connect them to their homeland. He describes them with such tenderness, even as he acknowledges how those traditions sometimes clash with his own like modern sensibilities.
It's a beautiful reminder that family is this complex tapestry of love and tradition and those inevitable like generational clashes and those little details, those quirks and habits, they're what make our loved ones so unique, so endearing.
It's those imperfections that give them their character, and one of the things that really struck me about this book is how it resists being like put in a box.
Yeah.
It's not just a memoir. It's not just poetry analysis. It's not just social commentary. It's all of those things kind of woven together in this really intricate way.
It's that refusal to be confined to a single genre or perspective that makes it so compelling. It's like he's saying that life is messy, full of contradictions and complexities, and our stories should reflect that. He's challenging those like traditional boundaries of what a memoir can be. Like
Yeah.
he's pushing the form in these new and exciting directions.
And that brings us back to the question that he poses at the very beginning, like how much can we truly know ourselves, given that we're constantly changing and evolving?
It's a question that doesn't have a simple answer, but it's one that's worth wrestling with. I think that's what makes this book so powerful. It doesn't offer any easy solutions or neat conclusions. Instead, it invites us to embrace the messiness, the uncertainty, the beauty of the human experience. It's a call to be more curious, more compassionate, more open to the different ways of being in the world.
And to remember that our stories, both individual and collective, are always unfolding. So we want to hear from you. If our lives are indeed these ever-changing collections of experiences, how much can we truly know ourselves?
Mhm.
Have you ever felt like an outsider or grappled with these complex layers of identity? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspectives.
And as always, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with anyone who might appreciate a little intellectual stimulation.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.